Hi, everybody. This is Dave Hodges. We are the show that is freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. And this is an emergency broadcast of the Common Sense Show. This is breaking information as we are getting it. I have covered some of these things in the past, but not to the depth and detail. We have talked about the fact that in Cal Exit, some of the more extremist radicals associated with Governor Brown and the Cal Exit movement have been planning to assassinate white people in public gatherings and so forth. But this event, these threats have taken a whole new turn, and they're dwarfing the original threats that we originally had broadcasted. On the line with me, I have Paul Preston from Agenda 21 Radio, who has some breaking inside information. Paul, thanks for coming on the show, and tell us what's going on.
Well, thank you, Dave, for having me on. And it's, of course, a very important message that we need to get across the American people, because we are trying to save lives at this point, because the information that we've been getting, and we've been doing a lot of research on this. I mean, we've been spending a lot of days and hours, it seems like, interviewing a lot of people north of the border, south of the border, and even in other countries. But it looks like that from what we are hearing today, that we're hearing that Wednesday, the 18th, is going to be a big day in terms of protests that you're going to start to see. They're going to start to spill across the border. You got a little taste of this 2 days ago, which was very minimally covered in the media. It never got to the national media, from what I understand. The gasoline protests, those were just basically, I think, a test run to see how people would react. But there's going to be more of those protests. A couple of things are happening. One, the peso is falling like a rock right now, and that's going to have a negative impact upon the economy of Mexico, and a lot of people are going to go without food. And as a result, we are predicting similar situations that we saw down in San Ysidro 2 days ago, in which there were so-called, quote, gasoline riots. We think it was more of a probatory situation where they're trying to see how we would react to something such as a riot across the border. They did, in fact, close the border a couple of times in San Ysidro.
Yes.
But, with minimal, influence in terms of military capability or forces, they just closed it down. It would be a whole different picture, Dave, if you have about 100,000 people that are bum rushing the border and at one time to come across the border. And now, what we have heard is that from San Diego to Brownsville, Texas, there's going to be massive massing of the illegal immigrants, and sprinkled with the illegal immigrants will be members of ISIS and Al Qaeda and Hamas. These members look and quote. This is I don't have the direct quote in front of me, but this is as it was explained to me by my source, who is very much inculcated with all this, and he told me that the so-called Muslims look just like Mexicans. How can you tell the difference? And they will be infiltrated amongst the hundreds of thousands that will come streaming across the border. And this is going to be happening again on Wednesday, January 18th.
Just in time for the inauguration, right?
Right. Perfect timing. Right.
And how do you expect our government to respond to this?
Our government won't respond. The only thing that will be responsive, I think, will be those officers that are sworn officers to try and stop it. And if you're in the military or if you're in Homeland Security and you're sworn an oath to this country, you have an obligation to ignore or not involve yourself in no orders coming from the White House at this point in time, because it's pretty evident what team the Obama administration is on. They are opening the borders to this. And, of course, Jerry Brown in California has been implicated as one of the main players in this whole situation going on at the border. We kind of knew this was kind of coming because of his stance that he's had on the illegal immigrants coming across the border and giving them licenses and so on. Jerry Brown feels pretty much like he's already the president of California, because the forces of Cal Exit are still clearly part and parcel of the forces that are coming, that are deeply involved with this so-called invasion across the border on the 18th.
Well, I remember you told me that your embed source at some of the Cal Exit meetings had an issue with some of the attendees at the meeting, which included members of the Mexican consulate.
That's correct.
And members of organized crime, otherwise known as the Mexican drug cartel, such as La Familia.
That's correct. And La Familia seems to be in the controlling seat of a lot of this right now. but a lot of it, I think, is really kind of coming from, as I'm deducting, from the Muslim Brotherhood, which means that if in fact it's the Muslim Brotherhood, which I'm about 95% positive on this, then that means the direction for all this is coming from the White House.
Okay. I'm trying to think if I should interject this here, because I want to mention to the listening audience, this is merely a breaking news preliminary report. We have breaking data as we go, but we need time to piece this together. But we're putting this out for a couple of specific reasons. Number one, we're concerned that people could be doing day trips on the border into Mexico,
Correct.
and they need to avoid this at all costs. People near the border, we think, need to arm themselves and take defensive measures. And if you could be somewhere else other than near the border, if that's where your residence is, you need to think about moving very quickly and getting out of harm's way. And Paul, as you said, we're trying to basically warn the people here. And we're getting a lot of interference in the background. Is that on your end, Paul?
It may be. Hang on here a second. Let's see if I can get rid of any of this stuff. Is that better?
Yeah, I'm getting. It's like a phone ringing.
No phone ringing. Not even in my head.
That is bizarre. Well, I'm going to tell you, this is more electronic harassment that we're experiencing here. There's no phone ringing on my end. The phones are all dead. I don't allow them in the broadcast area. I have my cell phone on, but it's on mute. But no landlines, no nothing else. And I know you probably kind of live by the same credo.
Right.
But that's still going on in the background here, so we'll just have to trudge on here
as
best we can. As you know, Paul, I've told you I've been in communication with two Mexican nationals. One's in the oil industry in Veracruz, and he was the first one to alert me to the fact that ISIS said they were going to blow up gas stations in response to the oil shortages. And sure enough, here, this is starting to come to fruition. I published that, I believe, almost 2 weeks ago. I made a podcast out of it. And then the other source, I believe, is in academia. He will not tell me what he does professionally, but is extremely literate in English, extremely well-read, very educated. So I'm suspecting a professor. They both have members, family members, who are in the cartels, and they're getting information about what to avoid, where to avoid. And they said, first of all, if you have a trip planned to the American Southwest, don't take it. And also they talked about, basically staying away from border areas. But these riots that you're talking about coming to the United States is not just going to be in the United States. These sources tell me these are going to go all across Mexico as well.
That's correct. And of course, all across the United States, because there's been hundreds of thousands of embeds that have been brought into the United States by the immigration programs of President Barack Hussein Obama. We know a lot of these to be ISIS, MS-13, and so on. MS-13 is specifically tasked to kill politicians. And
Yes.
We don't like politicians per se, and we always rag on them here, but no one should be subjected to this. But political assassinations are really what the MS-13 people and kids, most of them kids, by the way, are used to. They have committed these kind of crimes before in Honduras and Salvador and so on. But this is the thing for MS-13. They will be committing political assassinations. And I'm thinking that probably around Wednesday or Thursday, if in fact this whole thing starts to go into effect, and we don't stop it in some way. And the best way to stop it is, of course, information. As you and I know, we've stopped a lot of things with just the information getting out and leaking and exposing these things. This is a very, very big thing, and time is running out for the president and the Obama administration. And that's one of the reasons why they're doing it right now, is why they have command and control available to them, and they will have it by Wednesday.
Do you think CalExit is near the command and control center? Do they have a seat at the table?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Most of this, in my opinion, but especially the CalExit stuff, most of this in terms of the inflammation or the inciting of the riots and so on is all coming from George Soros and the Ryoshi Sasakawa Foundation, which are both the main funders of CalExit. And
Exactly.
CalExit is the movement to withdraw California from the nation and become its own state. And that's really what we're looking at here is if California goes, then the rest of the nation, or let's say the region of, as what was to many of our listeners would be known as Jade Helm 15, Aztlan, which is northern part of Mexico, but prior to the Mexican-American War, that was ceded to America legally and lawfully, I might add, to America, which includes Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Utah, Nevada, Colorado, parts of Wyoming, and so on. Those are the states that are most crucial, and of course, they just so happen to be Jade Helm 15. Isn't that just kind of a little clever little convenience that went on there in 2015?
Do you know, it's interesting that you mentioned this, because during Jade Helm 15, I was concerned enough about the developments of Jade Helm 15 that I brought in a link to Reconquista de Aztlan, which is specifically what you're talking about, and La Raza, which is the author of this. La Raza and Mecha were the authors of Reconquista de Aztlan, meaning reconquer the land. But it's interesting because Jade Helm 15, the map for Jade Helm 15, almost overlaid perfectly over the Reconquista de Aztlan map.
Right, and this has not been a new movement. This is a movement that's been called for since around the beginning of the last century. It was Trotsky who brought this idea to Mexico because he was exiled in Mexico, and on a mission, of course, and that was the destruction of American-style capitalism. And he felt that the best way to do this was to divide and conquer based upon races. And he brought that first notion of Aztlan to effect, and it was later on in the 60s that La Raza, the race, meaning the race, would sort of fire the thing back up again. And with the activism of the 60s, La Raza started to gain some traction with this whole notion of taking back Aztlan, Reconquistador, or Reconquista, as they call it.
Exactly.
The reconquering.
The one other variable I want to put in the brief time we have left, because we're going to do a full expose tomorrow. Paul and I are going to set a time after we hang up here, and our friends from NSA, which are ringing the phone in the background during this broadcast, that is not us, folks, I guarantee you. And those of you who followed my work long enough understand the electronic harassment that this show has been through. So we just ask for your patience and try to tune that out and stay focused on us. But I wanted to talk for a moment about the Chinese. One of the things that this source I have from Veracruz inside the Mexican oil industry with Pemex, he was telling me that the Chinese are taking a really strong interest in Mexican oil, and that Mexican government is pivoting towards China. And everything that I heard speaks to a Red Dawn invasion. So, Paul, let's tie all this together. Mexico, Calexit, and Chinese embeds, and I'm talking military embeds. What could you tell my listening audience about this?
We understand that in California, and our sources have told us there's about 300,000 Chinese embeds already, primarily around the ports of Long Beach, which, Costco, by the way, does anybody know what that means?
I don't know the meaning, but I know their association with this.
Chinese Ocean and Shipping Company.
Oh, my goodness.
So they own the port of Long Beach. They also are very deeply embedded in and around the port of Stockton, which is in the middle of Central California. But, a deep sea port in the middle of Central California, yes, that's the case. Also in West Sacramento, right next to Sacramento, California, is another deep sea port. So they've got those three areas that are really completely covered. And again, there's another portion of them up in Northern California, out in the Tule County area. Mm-hmm. And it totals about 300,000 from the latest that we have gotten. People of military age that could be called in at a heartbeat to take control of ports and so on.
And you're also aware of weapon caches that have been stored as well, correct?
There's weapon caches, and that was confirmed again today by my sources. And especially the last one I talked to, they said that they're going to be relying upon weapons caches that have already been established all throughout and around cities. Los Angeles and San Francisco are prime targets for disruption and rioting going on, promoted by pretty much La Familia and the rest of the Hispanic gangs. But there's going to be, like I said, a lot of embeds in these embeds, and that doesn't even count the paramilitary people that are supposed to be coming in as well. And by the way, I think we need to give a warning to the Navy. There's a reason why all of your carriers are in port right now. How undefended are they from a massive swell of people coming across the border, going to attack these carriers and seize these characters in Bremerton, in San Diego, in Norfolk? I mean, think about that. All these we have one carrier that's going out tomorrow. All of the rest of our carriers are in port. Guess what? That's just not an accident, ladies and gentlemen.
Paul,
That's called planning.
In between the time that we spoke earlier this evening and the time that we actually started this broadcast, I had one of my contacts get a hold of me, and he told me that I ought to look at Paul Craig Roberts' latest article. I believe it's entitled 10 Aircraft Carriers All Lined Up in a Row. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm close. And this is all over the net. As I'm looking at it right now, I'm on Before It's News, and this is the #1 story on Before It's News. So Paul has obviously picked up on this threat. Right. This is not idle chatter. And, there's so much that we're going to get into tomorrow that Paul and I need to sit down and actually scheme this out in terms of how we want to present it. But I want to leave the listening audience with a teaser. Paul and I are both familiar with a very recent documentary that's been released. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's produced by Trevor Loudon, who's just done an outstanding job exposing the New World Order. And Trevor, in this entitled a piece called Enemies Within. And I have been publishing parallel pieces that complement Trevor's research, but I want to say this for the record. There are Democrats right now in Congress today that know exactly of what Paul Preston is speaking about here.
Yep,
and I'm going to name a few of them right now. Nancy Pelosi, Al Franken,
Kamala Harris.
Right on. Folks, this number could go as high as 80. Also, and I'm making a preliminary estimate, I also think it could go as high as 100. Earlier in the week, Paul, as you know, I published an article where I listed a 2010 release from the American Socialist Party that talked about the number of congressmen who belong, and that number went over 80. And
right.
There are several prominent ones still involved today, Waxman, Rangel, and so forth. And people can find that on the Common Sense Show. But I'm telling you, this is one big happy family. And final thought on this as a teaser for tomorrow. We have a marriage that has taken place now between communist subversion in this country that's been going on since the early days of the Cold War, and the Russian defectors warned us about it, Bezmenov and so forth. These people warned us that we'd conquer you from within, and these people that were just mentioned, these Congress people, they belong to both communist front organizations, because no one belongs to the Communist Party. They only have 5,000 members, but they belong to communist front organizations that do work for them, or they belong, I should say, to Muslim Brotherhood organizations, right. And the Muslim Brotherhood controls all terrorist groups in the world. So this, Paul, we're going to tie all this together for the listening audience, but I wanted to get this on the record tonight because people no doubt are going to want to go do their research, and I've just given them a lot of places to start looking.
And don't travel to Mexico because they're going to kidnap Americans. That's the plan.
Yeah, that's
and
exactly.
Start tonight and do that. So please, people, don't go to Mexico.
I've been told that very same thing as we discussed before we came on the air. Well, Paul, I appreciate you on this very, very busy night, because I know you've got a lot on your table, coming on and talking to us about this. Hang on the line just for a moment, and we'll talk about when we can do a follow-up with this and present more detail of some of the teasers that we've laid out.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, this has been Dave Hodges along with my friend Paul Preston from Agenda 21 Radio. And just a reminder, everybody, we are joining the proud family of Red State Radio on Sunday evening. And that means there'll be a change in format. The first 5 minutes of every hour we'll be doing news. But we're going to greatly expand our reach of the Common Sense Show, and we're proud to make this association. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here again real soon.